Welcome back, I'm Tedward, and today, thanks to Bond Group in Waltham, Massachusetts, we're driving a 1974 Chevrolet Corvette Stingray. The C3 generation ran from 1967 to 1982, and boy, did they change over those years. C3 came with a wide array of small block and big block V8s, from the 327, 350 to the 427 and 454 big blocks, and in 1974, this was available with two 350 options and one 454. Now that's a pretty big deal because things changed a lot from 72 to 73. Power started being reduced, and this would have come with about 195 horsepower out of its small block 350. Not quite the 450 horsepower 454s that we would have seen only a couple years before, but notably, this 74 was the last year of a true dual exhaust without catalytic converters, because in 1975, the cat was required and it went into a single pipe and then came out on the other end. So it wasn't a true dual exhaust all the way back. Style-wise, they stayed fairly consistent. However, you will notice that the chrome bumpers went away for 74, and in the rear, this is actually a 1975 bumper cap because the 74 is very easy to spot. It's actually two pieces. There's a big seam down the middle of a 74 bumper, and in 75 they also added these little rubber bumper caps, and you can tell this front bumper is a 74, not a 75, because this doesn't have the rubber up front. But it does retain these beautiful wheels with the hubcaps. I always dug these. My dad has a 72 450 Corvette. It's been sitting in our garage for many, many years. And I always just thought this thing looked really stellar with the monster sidewalls. Now, the construction of this vehicle is fiberglass, but make no mistake, this is no lightweight. This convertible Stingray weighs about 3,400 pounds. That's a lot. That's a lot of steel. That's a lot of weight for a small two-seater. But overall, the car isn't exactly small. It's pretty long, so it gives you a feeling that you are in something substantial when you're driving it. And up here, you'll notice we have our little lock here and there. So what on earth could this lock be? Well, that is the alarm system on the Stingray. And prior to this, that used to be on the rear end. But this would prevent your car from being started. Because of course, in the 1970s, if you were a joyriding car thief, this is exactly what you would steal. Some slight inconveniences. Filling this with fuel means you've got to come up over the rear end with your fuel filler. And that also means there is no trunk, so you have very little storage space. However, inside, we do have a little bit of storage space behind the driver, but right here is actually our battery. So that sits behind you. I don't know if that's for actual like weight and balance to keep some weight in the back, or most likely just for the convenience of not packaging it up front. To put the top up on this convertible, you just pop this rear hatch open, and that allows you to get access to your top. Now this roof has a big old hole in it, so we're not gonna put that up today. We're gonna enjoy some top-down fun. Under the hood of our Corvette, you might notice this looks a little different than it should, because this is actually a small block Chevy 350 from 1988. Yes, this is a crate motor car, so this one should be making a little bit more than 195 horsepower that it would have made in 74, but I'll assure you, it's not going to go very fast because we are not working with a manual transmission. We actually have a 3-speed turbo hydromatic transmission. Yes, the turbo hydromatic, the automatic transmission with no turbo. And you can't spell it without dramatic. And it is a bit dramatic when you get into reverse and throw it into drive. The thing loves to lurch forward. But underneath, we still have the iconic orange block and valve covers. That is a staple of these things. Now for 73 and 74, this hood changed a bit too, because this used to have in 72 a deck that was pneumatically or vacuum actuated to lift up and allow for those windshield wipers to come out. No longer is that the case. These wipers just move freely. However, these headlights are still vacuum actuated. Let's get it started and I'll show you what I'm talking about. All right, so we've got our fuel gauge, our water temp coming up, our clock, our oil pressure, and our battery. But let me show you these headlights. We'll pop those up and they are not gonna come up in a hurry. one at a time. They pop up, and then we've got our beautiful 4-beam headlights. And the high beams, interestingly enough, are not controlled with the stock on the steering wheel. They are actually controlled down here on that foot pad. Your footrest is the high beams. When we pop them down, just like they went up, one at a time on the way down. That one takes a second. Come on, you can do it. So let's get out and take this beast for a little ride. Inside we have some convenience features. We've got power windows. That passenger window is especially fast. We've got our windshield wipers up here. You push for your washer, and then you can move side to side for your speed. And for a small amount of safety, a lap belt. Something I always liked about these Corvettes was that they had tilt and telescoping wheels. So you can get it just right in a good, comfortable position. Now, this steering wheel is a little different than it was in 1972. It's a bit cushier, it's a little smaller, and it's not just that plastic with all the little finger grips on the back. So we'll throw it into third gear. There is no drive in this, and we'll putt around and enjoy some V8 motoring. Now, unlike the 4-speed manual that you could get on this car, this has no overdrive. So third gear is actually 1-to-1. You can tell by those shift points that this car started to become more of a grand touring car from 73 to 74 and less of that monster muscle machine that it had been, which is just fine. I mean, it was the way of the world. We're starting to lose power due to emission standards. You're getting catalytic converters in 1975. So, you know, post 72, once you lose those 2 chrome bumpers, you lose a lot in the way of performance in these cars. This really would have only done, in its best day, 6.8 to 60. That's not fast. But that's not to say that the car isn't enjoyable. It is fun to drive, and it's oddly rewarding, despite the fact that it kind of drives like a pickup truck. It definitely feels kind of body on frame. You're just lugging it around with this big engine. And there was a bigger engine. A lot of folks did prefer the 454, despite the fact that it wasn't making nearly as much power as it had in the early 70s as it was in 74. But I think people felt like the 350 was more balanced. It was probably quite a bit lighter. Handling wise, it's always a bit of a handful. Like, I don't feel like I'm gonna go chuck this into some corners. Part of that too is because that rear end is a single leaf spring across the back. That's an iconic thing for Corvette, and that was a big deal when that changed, because that's like when Mustang went to an independent rear suspension. That was part of the architecture of these cars. The C3 Corvette is sometimes the butt of the joke, because the early cars, 67 to 72, those were cool. Those were proper muscle machines. Those things made power. Those things were little monsters on the street. You'd be a cool dude if you're driving one of those brand new back then, and still pretty cool today. But after 73, these started to become a little bit of the butt of the joke. And you'll see that even in Trailer Park Boys. Cyrus, kind of one of the nemesises of Ricky, he drives a 79 C3, and it's kind of a joke, and it's T-tops, it's all the things. But, you know, I think people are starting to catch on that they don't need these cars for performance. I don't think anybody's looking at this and saying, you've only got 195 horsepower. Like, it doesn't matter. This is not going to outrun pretty much anybody, even in the early cars. So people are just like, well, it's cool, it's fun, it looks neat, you can get them in great colors. Magnus Walker's rocking a C3 now. So that should tell you that they're on the way in terms of having a reasonably cool reputation for the future. It does feel like we've got to lug this engine because it just always wants to upshift. It wants to be in that third gear. Luckily, it's got a lot of torque, so it's kind of like a diesel in that regard. But I do find myself using this automatic shifter just to keep it in second once in a while. Braking is fine. It's got 4-wheel disc brakes, and this has just been redone. So they did brand new brakes on the car. So that gives me some confidence. This automatic transmission is always pushing against that. So if you're at a light, this is one of those cars that once in a while, kind of like an SL, you almost want to put it in neutral. Only got one side mirror, so that's okay. I mean, I guess you don't need that, but you know, with the top down, as you should always have it in a convertible, obviously no blind spots, so no problems looking over your shoulder for that rear 3/4. So in 2022, who is a C3 Corvette for? Well, especially in these years, I would say it's for somebody who wants something that's kind of fun, kind of stylish, something that looks faster than it actually drives. And it's just kind of a bulletproof, easy thing to operate because you've got a small block Chevy with a carburetor. I mean, if you can tune that, you're probably good to go for years to come. I mean, at that point, you're just enjoying buzzing around town with a little bit of a V8 rumble. You enjoy the vibe of a muscle car, but you don't need to be going and racing people light to light. Also, price-wise, these are a heck of a lot cheaper than their earlier counterparts because you want to get a really nice C3, you're going to pay for it. And I'll tell you what, on a nice fall day with the leaves coming into the cabin, I'm open to the world. People look at this thing, people like it. It's got a nostalgia vibe. And although, you know, at a car show, at a hot rod car show, people might say, well, it doesn't have the chrome bumpers and it doesn't have the pre-emissions issues 454. Well, that's fine. But, you know, at the end of the day, you're just trying to have a good time. Something that I really dig about this too is that this interior is the same as it was in, you know, 67 and 72. So you still get these same speedometer and tachometer in these center gauges. Later on, it did get like upgraded, but they look a lot more 80s. It's not the vibe for me. So I think if you're going to get one of these cheap C3s, you go for like a 74 or 75, so that way you can grab the old school interior. Now 75, you'd think with a catalytic converter and even less power at like 179 horsepower, you'd think that would have been a really rough year for Corvette, but in fact it was the second biggest selling year for the Corvette since 1969, which is crazy. So even though these cars were basically being neutered by the EPA and were no longer having their moment in hot rod society, they were still selling like hotcakes because this has a reputation. And that goes to show what the marketing does for a car like this, what the Corvette name means to people, even without the power. But look, that's what you're buying a car like this for. It's certainly not to be racing or anything like that. It's just to be cruising and enjoying the convertible experience in a fun hot rod. So thank you so much to Bond Group for the opportunity to drive this C3 Corvette. Thank you guys for watching, liking, commenting, and subscribing. Of course, thank you to the Patreon supporters. Don't forget to respect the drive, and I'll see you in the next one. Oh yeah.